Our speaker today is Blake Baca. Blake is owner of BVB Solutions, LLC, and an asset management coach with over 35 years of industry experience in mining, refining, smelting, oil and gas, power generation, foundry, manufacturing, and material processing. Blake started his career at Alcoa and spent 20 years contributing to the success of that organization. Blake is a Red Raider. True to my heart, my husband's also a Red Raider. Having graduated from Texas Tech University with a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and also holds a CMRP and a CRL certification. All right, everyone, you're here for Walk the Talk. Blake, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm gonna close this webcam if you don't mind, and get right into it. This we just went through. So let me go ahead and get started. Talk a little bit about reliability. Reliability is like safety. You have to have a culture and a mindset that says if safety is not an option, then reliability is not an option. You're using practices in your facilities. You're following procedures. You're doing things to make sure that you have some discipline in safety. We need to look at reliability the same way, because when you improve reliability, what happens is the way they're connected, you're going to reduce putting people at risk. If things don't fail, you don't have to have people in strange positions, and the risk of injuries are detected early and managed and planned. So why are we here? The purpose of this is provide you guys with the ability to communicate to leadership the value of asset management improvement if they don't know it. At the end, you'll see a little bit of a very, very simple self-assessment. You can look at some gaps there. And then there's you're going to see a lot of tools and techniques and things in here, but understand that those are tools and techniques. Asset management is a culture change, and it's got to be institutionalized, and you need to, like this presentation is, you got to walk the talk. Oops. So if you take a look at your facility right now, how many initiatives do you have going on? If you know what we're going to talk a little bit about what asset management is, but is there anything out there that's contradicting your asset management culture? Have you gone through some kind of a structured or a transformation, culture transformation, asset management, where you're just using tools and techniques, and you'll see things that are tools and techniques? If you're a leader, do you and your leaders understand and can you explain what the asset management concepts are? Do you understand that a culture will improve the business? It's just not a thing, a flavor of the day. Here's a big thing. I probably should have put courage. Do you have the courage to effectively push back? This is going to be a huge part of your culture change, where you're trying you have to push back up, because there might be some things that people may not be familiar with that you're going to have to say, well, that's not what we're trying to do. In this case, I did put courage in bold, because once we put this culture in place and once we're moving ahead, we got to hold people accountable. And I find that this is the biggest issue, is holding people accountable to all the work you've done in an asset management transformation. Secondly, changing the way that you're celebrating success. And we'll talk briefly about that in this. Because this whole thing is a change journey. And if you look at this particular chart here, it just talks a little bit about the journey is a change. So today, you're going to have a lot of people saying, we're living, we're going forward. If it ain't broke, why fix it? And then you get into, as you're going through this, and there's a lot of work, you start to see, I got too much to do. I don't have the way to do things. It takes a little time to get to the point of where you're discarding and you're not having to do things that way. People understand. And then you get to a point to where you slip all the way back to the beginning, and you got to be looking at continuous improvement. How are you doing these things? So this is a big journey we're talking about. And there's some certain concepts we're going to go through that I'm sure some people are familiar with, but you're going to see that it's a journey over time. Because where are we today and where we want to be? When we talk about this as a curve looking at the distribution of people at a facility or a culture or a population of people, right? So if you take a look, we have a couple lines here in a normal distribution curve. You have all these people that they're not knowing what asset management is, they're not able to do it. You have this, the way these people are separated out is you have over to the left, you have people that are not willing, And then you have this group of people that are the high flyers, the all-stars. They come in every day. They're trying to make improvements. They're constantly going over and beyond what they do. What I like to say is people over on the left, you're probably never going to do anything with those people. But the goal is to get everyone willing and ready to make the change. So you're moving this bar to the left. And the way you do that, again, we talked about, we've got to lead, we've got to communicate, engage people, we're coaching and mentoring. You're still going to have some people that are not able or not understanding. And these other people, you're going to have to figure out a way to get rid of them. But the goal is to get all of these folks through these things, through leading, communicating, engaging, team, and coaching, willing and ready to move forward with their culture change. Okay? So let me get into asset management a little bit here. So what are the requirements? You're going to see this a lot because I'm going to review. We got to have an operations and maintenance partnership. We got to understand what each other and hold each other accountable for what we're going to do. So typically what I recommend in this case is that you have some sort of a partnership agreement. These people are working together for common goals, okay? Everybody, this is just not a maintenance thing. This is everyone. Everyone's included in doing this. This is huge. We get this thing where we have maintenance people. We got a maintenance person for 35 years. We say, well, operations is my customer. We got to get out of that mode. We're in this together. We're out to make money. We're out to make product for our facility or mine it or whatever we do. Who owns the assets? We got to understand who that is. Operations is typically the one who owns that. It's not absolutely necessary, but we'll talk a little bit about how that is. Work management process. We can go online, we can find what work management is, we can look at it, but it's not a guideline. It's not something that you do. It's well-defined roles, who does what when, staying in your swim lane, so on and so forth. Do you have a CMMS? Do you have eMate? Do you have, it may not be eMate, you may have SAP, you may have Maximo. You're using that effectively with the work management process. When you buy assets, are you looking at it, this is how I'm going to manage this for the total cost of ownership over the lifetime of the piece of equipment, the way I buy it and the way I retire it. Do you have a culture that understands all this? Do you have a culture that's constantly looking at what's the business case? Why are we doing asset management? Why are we doing what we're trying to do? And we're looking at improvement. Because at the end of the day, if you take this, these are going to be a lot of analogies here in the beginning. We're all asset owners. We all have vehicles. We all have all kinds of things. But what's your philosophy? I talked about, I said, who owns your assets? Okay. So in your facility, who owns the assets? Is operations owns the assets? Or is it what I call a rental car philosophy? Is it something where operations is just going to use it and maintenance is going to fix it, repair it, maintain it, so on and so forth? Where you should be is that operations owns the assets. That's the leading practices. Typically, that's where people say that they are, even though they act like they're on the other side. So we need to understand what your philosophy. Another thing, is this the maintenance guy in your facility? Is he the hero that swoops in on Christmas Eve at 3 o'clock in the morning and fixes your facility? Is that maintenance to you? That's really repair, but okay. Is it subservient to production or operations? Is this the maintenance guy with operations sitting on the couch there? Or maybe is this the maintenance guy when it breaks and it's not repaired fast enough? Everybody's standing there tapping their foot. When are you going to get this fixed? So what is your culture? Okay. So recall we're all asset owners in this case. And here's a little bit of how we're those asset owners. Who's the operator of your vehicle? Think about your vehicle. Who's the operator? Okay, who operates? Who ensures that it gets maintained? Meaning, who takes it to get the oil changed? Who takes it to get the tires done? Who checks the, who looks at the kind of, if it needs new brakes, what do we do? Who washes it? Who's the operator? All right. Who's responsible? I mean, you don't have to take your vehicle in for an oil change. You don't have to do that stuff. Who's responsible for that? Who's responsible for the cost? Is it coming out of your bank account, or is it coming out of the guy is Dodge paying for it? All right. Who determines if you take it in for maintenance at all? Do you even do that? Who owns that cost? So who owns your vehicle and who owns the reliability of that vehicle? Okay, this is something to continue to think about. Who's responsible, but on the other hand, who's responsible for determining the frequencies? Meaning, I bring it in every 3,000 miles, I bring it in every so many hours. Who does that? You look at what's popping up. This is the the different manufacturers, the OEMs, they don't own this stuff, okay? Who make sure that the people that are working on these things are certified and have been trained and so on and so forth, okay? Who make sure that the maintenance that people do eliminates or postpones a failure, okay? So if you're looking at it, you see it in the first case, we had the operator was the asset owner. In this case, this is more like maintenance. This is the maintenance people, okay? So, you know, for an example, when I take my truck to the Dodge place, I tell them what the problems are, you know, what I'm hearing, whether I fix it, it's my decision. So I'm the asset owner. Person at the Dodge place or the service manager at the Dodge place, he's the maintenance group. But something happens when we get to all our facilities, and these are just some examples of facilities that I've worked in. Everything changes. How we do things outside the gate for some reason changes. And the question is why? Why does it change when we get to these facilities? So I'm going to use another example before we move on. So everybody know who this guy is, maybe not, depending on what part of the United States or world you're from. But this is Joey Logano, and he's a 2024 NASCAR Series Cup champion. This guy right here is his crew chief, Paul Wolf, okay? One particular thing that we notice about in here is what's specific or what's interesting about this picture is he's got earphones and he has a microphone. Where these guys can constantly be in communication when he's racing, okay? Then you got the team, okay? So if you're looking at the team and you're looking at the driver and you're using this analogy, who's the asset owner and the operator? Well, it should be obvious at this point that Joey is the asset owner, and your asset expert and advisor, the person at the Dodge place, at the Chevy place, who's the asset expert and advisor? It's Paul Wolf. He's the guy with the headset on that we saw, okay? And if these folks are working together, what would happen if they weren't working together? What kind of success would they have? Okay? They wouldn't have much success if they weren't working together as a team with the same goals, which is the team's winning, okay? So when they do, this is a result. This guy wins, okay? That's what happens. So if at your facility, you're thinking as an analogy, obviously we're all not in a NASCAR race car. We're not in that business, but if we are, just think of what the kind of wins we should get if we're working together rather than pointing the finger at each other, okay? So in this case, the asset owner is typically the operations department, and your asset reliability and maintenance advisor is typically your reliability and maintenance departments. And this is the way we're going to look at this as we go forward. Because operations and maintenance needs to be thinking, again, this is a culture change. So if you're not in this mode and you're pointing fingers at each other and blaming each other, and operations breaks things and maintenance never fixes anything, we need to focus on these things. We're working together. We understand the challenges. We have joint accountability. Operations is still the asset owner, but we have joint accountability for equipment. We ask why rather than how soon you're going to get it fixed. We work together. We stop recurring failures. We set priorities and schedule that maintenance work because we understand the value of the maintenance work that we're going to get done. So that's where we're trying to get to, because we're trying to get to a partnership between operations and maintenance. Okay, so that's asset management. So let's go back. I'm not going to go through all these because we just reviewed, but just recall these are the things that I said were requirements for asset management. Okay, these are not the only things. We're going to continue on into what those things are. The other thing is we need to have some kind of reliability engineering process. We need to understand, you know, are we using the right methodology? Do we know our critical equipment? How are we solving problems to root cause? How do we come up with our asset strategies? Where do our PMs come from? So on and so forth. And then how do we effectively apply those things? So reliability engineering is something that's a requirement. It's something that you need to have. You don't necessarily have to have degreed engineers in this particular role, but it helps. But they need to be focused on that, okay? And their failures need to be, their job needs to be focused on elimination of failures, okay? That's their job, okay? So that's a requirement for good asset management. And so what do these reliability engineers do? Well, they're only focused on reliability. They apply the concepts that they learn. They're experts in this. They're identifying causes that cause failures. They're applying those methodologies. They're analyzing information about the reliability of things. They're analyzing data. We're getting data back. How often did these things fail? How long did they run? What's the root causes? They're working with maintenance planners. What are the preventive and predictive procedures? How are we lubricating our equipment? How often are we doing? What lubrication are we doing? They're taking the lead they're taking the lead in the maintainability. They're not the maintenance manager. They're not things like that. I'm going to show you in a second the things that they shouldn't be doing. This is where we don't walk the talk. We get reliability engineers in place and we have them do things that are not the elimination of failures and a focus on that. Okay. They set up condition-based maintenance programs. They interpret the results, vibration, oil analysis, motor circuit analysis, all kind of infrared thermography. They're the ones who are championing this, and they're the ones who are interpreting those results. They're part of reliability. Remember, we talked in the beginning about the total cost of ownership. They have roles in there where they're focused in on how are we buying this equipment such that it has a long life. Okay. Here's some of the things they don't need to do. I'm not going to go through all these. You can read them. They don't do design work. They're focused on failures. They don't do planning and scheduling. That's for planners and schedulers. They're not doing the inspections themselves. They're interpreting the data. These guys may work for these guys. They don't do troubleshooting, okay, routine troubleshooting. There should be some kind of a help chain to where I finally got to get to my engineer because it's gone beyond the scope of a technician. They don't direct technicians. They're not supervisors. They're not implementing the maintenance strategy. That's for a maintenance manager. They don't respond for all the maintenance organization. They don't do budgets, the budget modeling. You see, these things they're not gophers, because what ends up happening, we put a guy in a reliability engineering role or a gal or someone in those roles, and they're doing everything except focusing on the elimination of failures. And that is walking the talk. And say, hey, you have reliability engineers? Yes, we do. What do they do? Well, the design steps, they do all these things like this. So again, this is walking the talk. The focus on eliminating failures is key for the reliability engineer. Okay, so recall again, these are the kind of things. We have a reliability engineer that's focused on reliability. The next part of it is that we got to measure, because what gets measured gets improved. And we'll show you that a little bit later, some basic things that we need to measure to say, how are we doing? So you go out and what you'll find is we have all these different things. You know, we said, hey, Blake's a CMRP and he's a CRL, and you know, we talk about ISO 55000. I'm going to go into that, but that's the asset management ISO strategy or ISO standard. There's workshops. There's lean. We got maintenance. We got books. We got Frankus. We got all these different things. Defect elimination. We got the DIPF curve. We have PM optimization. We know all these great terms and people throw them out all over the place. But do we use them, and do we know how to effectively use them? That's what this presentation is about, is actually knowing what these things mean and using them rather than throwing out a bunch of acronyms. I've been at facilities where they've had 4 different folks like me come in, or groups like me, and they have these wonderful process maps. But why do they have so many? Because they're not walking the talk. They're not doing the things. They're not using those requirements that I said you got to have. You got to hold people accountable. You got to have the courage when people say don't follow this. And this wasn't probably cheap to have 4 different consulting groups come in and build process and work on these things. Things need to be implemented and institutionalized. Asset management is not a flavor of the day. It's how you do your business. So that's walking the talk. We do a lot of work to build these processes. Why don't we use them? Why aren't they effective? So on. Okay. So why do we do asset management? Bottom line, reliability. That's why we do it, because we want to push the button and it runs every time I push the button. That's reliability. We want to improve that. We want to improve the availability. When I push the button, it runs until I tell it to stop. It doesn't fail in the time frame. So we want to know how available that piece of equipment is to do whatever it needs to do at our facility. And last, but definitely not least, we're trying to drive our costs down through reliability and availability. We're trying to say our dollars per unit or our dollars of operation. We're trying to drive those things down. This is a no-brainer. We should know this, but the only way we're going to get there is by walking the talk in these asset management concepts. So the way I like to look at it is in a three-pronged, what I call a three-pronged approach. There's work management, there's asset strategies and the development of those, and the bad actors, which are the costly and repetitive items that make an impact to cash flow. This is what I always refer to when I go to asset management. So some things you can ask yourself when you get into these is, you look at the one prong, you say, okay, asset strategies. How did I create those things? How were those created for my facility? And work management. How do you manage the urgency of maintenance work get performed? What needs to be done today? What needs to be done this week? What needs to be done the next outage? What needs to be done next week? So on and so forth. Do you have maintenance planners? Do you have people that are planning maintenance work? Okay. And what are their objectives? Are your maintenance efficient? Are your maintenance technicians efficient and effective? Typically, everyone says they just ride around in the plant and or in the mine or whatever, and no, they don't ever fix anything, and so on and so forth. What are they working on? Do they have things that they have? Do they have the things and the expectations that they need to be successful? Or are we just saying, oh, they're technicians, they're trained, they should know what to do? And lastly, but definitely not least, in the third prong, what are you doing to eliminate, substantially postpone repetitive and costly failures that make an impact to cash flow? What are you doing about that? How are you eliminating those things? Are we just living with it? Okay, so these are some questions in those three prongs that you can ask yourself. Okay, because you're trying to get through stages of reliability. You may be in a place right now, you may be in stage one where everything's reactive and you're just fixing stuff constantly. And you just have a culture that says we're firefighting and failures are ineligible. We're just going from one crisis to the next. But as you start implementing asset management, the processes, the tools, and holding people accountable, you start to move up the curve to where you're trying to get to, stage 4. You have cross-functional teams, debottlenecking, things are getting done faster. You're looking at your competitive position for your facility. Okay, I had to leave a facility after 20 years and shut it down because we were trying to get to stage 4, but it took too long. We didn't have that kind of time. We didn't have the time for the culture change, which is why I started this business, so I could help people do it faster. Reliability is about, it's at the end of the day, it's you eliminate the defects and that result in failures, and you're focused in on what the best availability and the lowest cost. We've talked about that. So at the end of the day, we're always about cost and availability. Okay. So at this point, I don't know who's on this call or this webinar, but typically where I get to is I'm talking to reliability and maintenance professionals, and they all know this. So all I'm doing is preaching to the choir. What I always want to get to is, where's my leadership and where's my operations people? Because we got to get people to understand, we got to get the whole culture to understand the things we as reliability and maintenance professionals are trying to do, because we're not doing it for our own good. Okay, so I'd just like to put this in here because at this point I'm probably preaching to the choir. If these are the only people I'm talking to, we're going to start to see these kind of things of the top reasons that things fail. I'm not going to go through each one because you guys will have an opportunity to see this, but basically we don't have everybody on board. We don't have people committed. We're just talking about it. We do asset management. We have reliability engineers. We put planners in, but they work on what do? They go get parts. I mean, we have those things, but we're not walking the talk of asset management. Okay. So, really what helps bring that together, but it's not always needed, is it's good to have a burning platform. What is a reason that you're needing to do asset management? One thing is, if you're smart, it's the right thing to do, but you got to learn a little bit about it to do that. Typically, burning platforms might be poor reliability. Do you have poor availability? You might have both. Do you have high cost per unit? I'm just giving some examples. Do you have all of the above? Are you not competitive? I mean, I could go on and on. These are the kind of things that are burning platforms that you need to look at. Okay, so if we get into the three-pronged approach again that we just got through talking about, I want to focus on each one of these individually to show you a little bit about what walking the talk in asset management is. So let's talk about the asset strategy. This is typically where I like to start. I should probably maybe move asset strategies to the top because this is where I start, but this is kind of the way. So we got to build these asset strategies. So I hope everybody knows what asset strategies are, but I'm going to give a little bit of a background. So what are the PMs that we have? What's the condition-based maintenance that we do? What are these asset strategies? That's an asset strategy, okay? So when I talk about the interdependence, I'm talking about the interdependence of these 3 points on the prong, okay? How are they created? What are these asset strategies? If you have them, how are they created? Are they OEM recommendations? I could do a whole presentation about OEM recommendations, about how they're good, the pros and cons. Do they come from failures? Do they come from best practices? Sometimes people say, hey, this thing keeps failing, you need to put a PM. That's not how you generate a PM, but it happens, okay? And I have some war stories about that, where people wanted PMs that, we did a PM, but it didn't eliminate any failures, and that's the goal. Did it come from reliability centered maintenance? Okay, so that's really where we want to get to. If you have them, have they been optimized? And we'll talk a little bit about the optimization of those things. Most people, you come into a place, they have the PMs, but they haven't been optimized. We'll talk a bit about that. Because what you're trying to find out is, where am I spending my maintenance labor? Typically, if you look to the left, think about your facility. Typically, you may have all these things. You may have condition-based maintenance. You may have PMs, and you're doing a lot of reactive work. But typically what we see is about 15% come from OEM, leading practices, maybe some RCM. A lot of the PMs are coming from OEM. That's where we see a lot of stuff. But otherwise, really, we have them, we're not really doing them, they're ineffective, so we just react. What we're trying to get to is on the right-hand side of this particular thing is, we're trying to get to, we don't even touch the thing. We just do condition-based maintenance. We do vibration analysis. We're doing oil analysis. We're not having to do anything to the equipment, and we reduce our PM because our PM, typically things we have to shut down the equipment. The shutting down the equipment, even for PM, makes an impact to the uptime of the equipment. All right, so we're trying to get over to the right, and of course, what we're trying to get to is we don't have failures. We're trying to get there. If you think about condition-based maintenance, you can think about a maintenance-free battery. Years ago, we used to put water in batteries. That was the only had. Now we get to a point we buy a battery, we don't touch it until it fails, okay, over a certain amount of time. So we're trying to go from the left to the right. This is kind of where we're trying to get to on asset strategies. To understand that, though, in building that, we got to understand what a failure is. So our culture change ends up being understanding what a failure. And typically people say, well, when it's broken, it's a failure. Culture needs to change. So there, years ago, some guys worked for United Airlines, and there was a lot of planes that were having issues, and their guys named were Nolan and Heath, and they came up with the definition of what failures are. So basically, a failure is a presence of an unacceptable condition. A functional failure is that it's not doing what it's supposed to do. It's not pumping, the pump's not pumping 100 GPM at 50 feet ahead, okay? That's a failure, okay? Potential failure says, hey, if it's only pumping 90 GPM at 40 feet ahead, it's not a final failure, but it's already started to fail. And the way we look at that is, they came up with is what's called a P to F curve. And this is, I'm going to show this a couple times. You may have seen it before, but the idea is a lot of people live over here to the right. They don't understand that as we start to see things happening to our piece of equipment, okay, we start to hear something, then it starts to vibrate, and we're starting to see oil. Each step through here, as we slide down this curve, is a failure. We need to be looking at how do we kind of keep ourselves to the left. So how do we do that? Well, the way we do that is we do it through RCM, okay? So when we're trying to be proactive about solving those potential failures, okay? If we go back, the other was if we had an unanticipated failure, we're trying to find the root cause of that, but that's really more root cause failure analysis. This is really how we're gonna build our asset strategies, okay? So reliability centered maintenance, or RCM, is what do we do? The very technical definition is what should be done to ensure the physical asset continues to fulfill its functions within a context. So what we're saying there is we have a goal. We want this pump to pump 100 GPM at 50 feet ahead. And so what do we need to do to ensure that it always does that? What are the kind of things, how do we need to operate it? How do we need to maintain it, so on and so forth? So how do we go about doing that, okay? So we go back to the curve here and we're saying, okay, we want it to live over here to the left. So we need to make sure that what are the types of failures that are happening? How do we address those and move to the left, okay? So if we're saying moving to the left, if we're someone who lives over on the right-hand side over there, we're saying that's not our culture. Our culture is how long can we run till it fails? Well, we're already seeing it fail, so we're not even using the right words at that point. How bad is it? How soon can it get it running? That means we're living over here to the right hand. This is not where we want to leave. This is where it needs to be rebuilt. It's down. Nothing's happening. Okay. As we start to become more mature, and as we start to build our asset strategy, we want to live moving to the left, as I keep saying. So is there a way we could have predicted or prevented this failure? What tolerances are necessary? Is this the best way to detect this failure, this potential failure that's happening? And of course, when you're talking to people, it's like, hey, it's early, but let's make sure we address it. Okay, so that means we're moving over here to the left. Okay, we're picking these up. How do we go about that? Very mature organization lives over on the left-hand side of the curve because they're proactive. This is when it's not failure. This starts out with how did I install it? Okay, Did I use precision to install it? Did I use laser alignment? Did I have detailed installation procedures, or was I back in that mode I said before as well? They're craftsmen, they know what to do. So we're trying to build our asset strategies, and we're trying to understand how we maintain that equipment by being very proactive and understanding the failures. Okay. So if you look at this, this is over to the left. This is the DIPF curve, or the P/F curve that people talk about. And the thing about this is we don't want to live over here on the right-hand side. Okay, so you can see the asset can't do what it's supposed to do. We want to do everything we can do to live to the left. And there's entire, way longer presentations than this that you can go through on this. I just wanted you to get a flavor of that. Because we're trying to get to asset strategies. And when I talk about asset strategies, these are the kind of things I'm talking about. You know, there's no scheduled maintenance. You know, you don't really maintain windows or headlights. There's usage-based inspections. There's usage things you do on an engine. Condition, if you're thinking about your monitor or your wipers, they're getting cracked. Your tires, they have enough tread. You know, you may have a failure finding, looking at the exhaust. These are the asset strategies. These are the kind of things we're talking about. Okay, what's your spares look like? How many? Why don't we have 5 spares on this truck? Why don't we have 1? There's an analysis to go through and do that. As I said, typically these asset strategies, and they come from your OEMs, but your best practice is using RCM and failure modes and effects analysis. Okay, so we get into the fact that, hey, I have PMs, and we talk a little bit. I talked about, hey, we got to have optimized PMs. So the question is, do these PMs prevent or postpone a failure? If they're not, why are we doing it? So we need to review them. We need to look at words in our PMs that say sample oil, sample inspect. I've been seeing PMs that say inspect the window. I don't know, inspect the gear. Well, what are we expecting it for? We got to get some more detail in these things. These are optimizing these PMs. Okay, so if we find that these PMs aren't eliminating or substantially postponing a failure, we need to get rid of them. How long do they take? Right? Sometimes you'll say, oh, everything takes 2 hours. No, it may take 30 minutes to do something. So you're trying to do this and understand, how do I optimize these PMs? This is our typical process in doing that. So we're actually, I'm not going to go through each one in the essence of time, because there's a lot more to talk about. But we review the procedure. Does it eliminate a failure? If it doesn't, well, why are we doing it? Okay. If we say yes, that the procedure, if you're looking at the left, it does, then we're going to look at each task. We need to understand each task. We understand who's doing it, how often, why are maintenance people do it, can operations people do it? Okay. So this is PM optimization, and this is in your packet. You'll be able to see that. All right. So if we're talking about eliminating or substantially postponing failures, and we said, hey, we got to go to RCM. We don't have any. I mean, it's a tedious process. I'm just going to go high level. We got to go through RCM. We got to understand our hierarchy. We got to do a criticality analysis. We got to do failure modes and effects analysis. And from there, we can actually get our equipment or our asset strategies that are preventive maintenance, condition-based, so on and so forth. So if you've gone through all those things, you've gone through your optimization, then we're going to have to get through this to understand what our asset strategies are. All right, so if we go back, this was what we were talking about. Do you have them? How are they created? Have we optimized what we have? If not, we got to go through and do some RCM. Okay. So we talked about asset strategies. So now we've got these asset strategies built. We got to execute them, and we got to execute them effectively. So that gets into your work management process. Okay. So your work management process is leadership and operations first. Again, you didn't see maintenance in here. Okay. They got to have the confidence that maintenance is going to execute what we came up with, so that they see the value. Because people will say, well, you used to just show up to control room. We told you what to do, told you what to fix, and you went and did it. So people start to, if the culture change has to be that they see the value in doing that, rather than, well, I just used to call you and we fixed it. That's part of that change, okay? Because maintenance has to provide effective, quality work, and they got to be able to do something that's eliminating failures or reducing the rework or reducing the mean time between failure. So just like we look at, we want 0 injuries. You remember from the beginning of this presentation, our goal in safety is 0 injuries. We're trying to get our equipment to 100% availability. Will we ever get there? We may not. Our mindset needs to be just like we have processes and things that we do for 0 injuries. We can do the same thing and focus on 100% availability. Okay. So again, this is an example of where This is from a real facility where we have these things that are sitting inside of the lunchroom, maintenance lunchroom or operations lunchroom. And it says, it's hanging on the wall in there. I can tell you this facility did not walk that talk at all. Did they have planners? Yes, they did. Did they schedule work? Yes, they did. Did they do it effectively and they do it all the time and they do it right? No, they didn't at all. That's why I was there. So having this posted but not following it is not walking the talk. And that's an example I wanted to show you. So as we're talking about work management, this is really what it looks like. It's several steps from work identification, screening, all the way to continuous improvement. And again, when we talk about work management, I said, do we understand in our business what we're going to do first? What's our priority? Are we going to do it today? Are we going to do it this week? Are we going to do it next week, next month, next year? So that's really our prioritization. We got to understand how we determine what that is, because unfortunately we get in situations where everything's needs to be done today, and that's not true. So we got to have an organization that understands what this means and how do we get there, okay? So we got to define that. When are we going to do it? That's part of that work management. Again, if I'm creating these asset strategies, when do I need to do it? If something fails, when do I need to do it? What's the urgency of when I need to do the work? What's the prioritization? Have you created that? And last but definitely not least, everyone is held accountable. General manager, plant manager, mine manager, refinery manager, all the way down to the lowest organization on the floor, to the hourly, incoming, entry level. Everyone follows this role. And again, this is part of that culture change. And you end up posting this in the plant. This is a real example in a facility where this was created by the organization, and they understood what needed to be done today, what types of work need to get done. This is actual in real practice, okay? Because what we're trying to get to is we're got to build processes for each one of those things, from work identification to planning, scheduling, execution, completion, and continuous improvement. We got to be able to do that. So we got to build processes to identify work, to screen it for appropriate and impact of the business, to manage the backlog. What do you want the planners to work on proactively first? How do I plan the work? Okay, does that include a kitting and staging process? What are the parts that we need for efficient maintenance execution? Schedule the work, execute the work. Okay, all these processes need to be built. They need to have defined roles and responsibilities. And we, again, encourage to hold people accountable and address and exercise consequences when they're not following those things. Okay, we got to be able to complete these things and capture the history for reliability engineering. We talked about reliability engineering. This is to look at how do I need to move to a continuous improvement role. Okay, so again, we need to build processes inside of all these things, and we need to hold people accountable to those things. We can store those in a book somewhere. We can have them on a server. We can have them on our intranet. We have those things, and they're visual and communicated. All right, and the processes are happening. All right, and we understand it so that they're out in front of people. We're not spend all the time building this stuff and put it in a drawer and never look at it again. Okay, that's not walking the talk. That's a waste of money and time. Okay, so here's a quick thing. This is kind of long, but basically, you're a plant manager, or you're part of an organization, or a plant manager who sponsored this, and he goes out in the plant and he takes pictures. He sends the maintenance manager, says, fix all these things, and by the way, my air conditioner's broken. What do you think the problem is there? Would that be walking the talk if I just gone through a transformation? These are the kind of things. This is real world. This is a real example of someone who probably spent $500,000 putting these things in. So why would they do that? Okay, that's just something to think about. Okay, so we just got through talking about work management. We're going to get to last but not least, but one of the most important parts of this three-pronged approach, which is defect elimination. Okay, so recall we just went through that. We said we got to have a work management. The first thing was we got to build our asset strategy. The second piece is we got to have work management. Okay, the last part is we're going to focus on bad actors or defect elimination. So you got this work management process, and you're going through, you should be, if you're following the process, we should be building a history of data. What failed? How often? What's going on? You got to be able to Pareto those things out, okay? Once you Pareto these things out, you have a process where it says, hey, we're going to be meeting with leadership to make the decisions. Again, leadership in the current state of your facility might think, oh, this is below me, this is what engineers do. No, this is what everyone does. This is a culture, okay? And there's a process to build that says, what are the things that are killing me right now that I need to work on? Again, are you reliability engineers? Do you have a reliability engineer focused on that? Are they trained in root cause? Guess we need to find out. We need to find out if these things are repetitively failing, or if they're a high cost failure. Do you have reliability engineers, and have they been trained effectively in root cause analysis? Do you understand what that cost is? What's the impact of cash flow of those failures or repetitive failures? Okay. So what you do is you correlate these things. If you have the data, and you should have the data coming out of your CMMS, if you put in the work management process, and you should be able to correlate what are the things that are taking me out. And these arrows or these lines are to show, hey, we may have had a failure of 8 times, but it only cost us, less than $10,000. So leadership, a reliability engineer puts this together, presents this to leadership on an ongoing, when we have a process to do this where it's ongoing, we're picking what we're going to work on and solve the root cause. And what we get to is we start to make impacts to cash flow. This is an example. This is meant to show you an example of here's the analysis, and here's the savings that we got in a year because we were getting 13 failures a year, and now we've eliminated that failure through root cause analysis. And this is just a flash report or a cost risk benefit analysis that talks about what we did on that. Okay, so this is a very important part of your 3-pronged approach. Okay, so again, we got to have a reliability engineer. We got to be focused on eliminating failures. And I talked about, and then we got to measure ourselves. How well are we doing in our asset management? Okay, so some of the easy things in the top 5 things that I recommend that you look at is how well are we using our people? Are we fully loading our maintenance schedule? Okay, well, we know things are going to break. Well, how much is going to break? Are we fully loading it, and do we have a process to work on the things that break into our schedule? Okay, how much are we getting complete? How many work orders are we actually completing? Okay, how many work orders and how much of that available work are we working on such that we may have got pulled off, but we were trying to be proactive? Okay, so what's the schedule compliance? All right, are we doing our PMs? We built asset strategies. They're good. They're supposed to eliminate or substantially postpone failures. Are we completing them? And if we're not completing them, if we're not 100% on this, why aren't we? If we said those are the things that eliminate failures, why aren't we doing that? We do that around what we call the 10% rule, which means if the frequency is, say, of 30 days, I do my PM every 30 days, then I get credit in this KPI for only doing it within 10% of that frequency. So I got 3 days to do it. If it's a weekly PM, I got to do it that day because we said there was a reason that we determined that frequency. And last but definitely not least, what's the emergency and break-in type of work, the things that are breaking into the schedule that are causing us a downtime, impact to cash flow, and how are we working on those? Those are 5 to look at, okay? But the deal is, don't put these in people's performance expectations, because you know what'll happen? You'll get where you want to get. This is a means to improve. So if you're at 20% or something, you're not at a good percentage, what are we doing to improve? As soon as we put these in people's performance expectations for the next year, guess what? They're going to get made. I've seen it over and over and over, so that's going to happen, okay? So this is going to be, this next piece is you could probably spend a little bit more time, but I just want to show you how those things work together to how these work management and defect elimination works together. So if you're talking about work management, I'm going to go pretty quick through this, so you may have to go back and look at this. But if you have 10 technicians and you say they work 6.5 hours a day because you've taken out 1.5 hours for lunches, breaks, safety meetings, and if you think that number should be 8, fine. I challenge you, if I ever came to your facility and says your guys are not working 8 hours a day, they got things going on. So you're going to have, for 10 guys, you're going to have about 325 hours a day, okay? If you're working on it, you're pretty good at it, you're saying, hey, I'm going to schedule, you want to schedule to 325, you're focused on trying to get 100% schedule, but you only got 281 that week. So really, you're at about 86.5% scheduled that week. You haven't hit a lick yet, okay? We worked some overtime for some reason, and we also worked some scheduled hours. We worked part of that. So what we ended up with was 183 hours was our scheduled hours worked. All right. So what's your schedule compliance? Well, it's 183 over 281. It's not 325 because we didn't fully load our schedule. So we're looking at about 65% schedule compliance, okay? Actually, though, you're at 56% schedule compliance because you didn't fully load your schedule. So you're really only working at about 56%. So you're only making about 56% of your total schedule. You work this overtime and you got this unscheduled work, so you have all this work in here. So what is all that? Okay, who requested it? Why did you not work on your schedule, and why? What was the purpose of that? That's your defect elimination, because the reason you're working, the root cause of the reason that you're working all this work in here, what is it? We need to get back to heading in the direction of working all of our schedule, fully loading our schedule, fully executing our schedule. Okay, some things you can look at in the future. With that, with all those break-ins and all that work you got going on, here's an example of something. A plant has a piece of equipment failed 2:30 a.m. on a Saturday. Think about your plant. Would you celebrate success, buy jackets, give a barbecue, ice cream social for that? That's a typical thing. Here's a culture change and walking the talk. Celebrate together. Increases of reliability. Rather than celebrating, hey, we had to get up in the middle of the night and go fix something, focus on celebrating these kind of things. This is walking the talk. This is the culture change, okay? Increases in overall equipment effectiveness. You've gone through and you've solved the root cause. You've eliminated some failures, okay? Here's another one. You got a plant, you extruded a hydraulic unit failure, okay? You're down. What's going on? So in the walk the talk world, or let's talk about what happens in the current state. What typically happens is people are asking, hey, how soon can we get this running? How could we have run out of spares? Are you flying them in? Did you replace something? That's focus on how to get it going quickly. That's fine. But if you're in a proactive reliability culture, you're asking the questions. In addition to those, you're saying, did you figure out the root cause? Are we following the right process to make sure we meet will it start up in a precise state? So we want to make sure that we say, yeah, we got to get it running again, but we want to make sure that we're getting it running right. Okay, so that's the main thing there. Okay, so that's again walking the talk of this asset management culture. All right, the three-pronged approach is what we're talking about. So recall, we got to have these requirements. Okay, these are requirements for asset management. We've gone through these. Okay, we got to have good reliability engineering. We got to measure ourselves. Okay. But here's the biggest thing of all. We talked about it at the beginning. In order to make sure that this stuff works and we're walking the talk and we're using the acronyms and all the things that we want to do, we got to have leadership commitment. It will not work. It'll be tools and techniques if we don't have leadership commitment. Because if you have the leadership commitment, well, then you're walking the talk. Okay? So this is the last thing, and I'm going to say, what is leadership commitment? What do I mean by leadership commitment? I can talk about it all day, but let me give you some examples of leadership commitment. Leadership has personal knowledge of the asset management principles, the asset ownership. You go through publications, your training, you're on conferences and webinars as leadership. I understand you have other things, but this is part of running the business. You articulate the opportunities. We talked about what are the burning platforms, what's the business case. Lower cost, more production, your availability, and you hold your team accountable. This is the biggest gap I find when I go and do this. I end up leaving a site because the leadership team cannot hold their people accountable. They're tired of me telling them, you need to hold your people accountable. I call it consultant fatigue. Understand that we're now a partnership. It's not a customer-supplier relationship. You follow the process. Everyone, it's not a guideline. You share the KPIs. Everyone owns those KPIs I showed you. There's accountability for individuals and teams, okay? You lead by example. Get people excited about this. We go through and we do communications. What are the priorities? It's not an initiative. It's how we run the business, and we challenge the good with the better, okay? Remember these questions. Talk to the beginning. Asset strategies, how are they created? Work management, how are you execute? What's the urgency of your work? Do you have planners? Are the maintenance technicians efficient? You have a defect elimination process. Okay, remember these questions. Okay, this will lead you into the self-assessment. This is the last piece here. So if you had asset strategies, were they created from OEM recommendations? Simple. This is a simple self-assessment. So give yourself a 0 for a yes or a 1 for no. Okay. Do you have critical spare parts? Okay, part of asset strategy development is finding out what those critical spare parts. So do you know what those are? Score yourself. Are you skipping your PMs you created from your asset strategy, or even the ones you have currently? Are they being skipped for failures or other reasons? Score yourself. Is the urgency of work required by maintenance based on emotion, or do you have a priority, like I showed, a visual that says these are the kind of things we're gonna talk about. This is how we know the urgency. Yeah, maintenance planners are focused on the future, or are they working in the current week or today? If you don't have maintenance planners, deduct a point from yourself. Do the planners order parts for emergency work? They shouldn't be. They should be about next week, next month, next year. Are the job plans detailed? Do they tell people exactly what to do that they're working on? Are your maintenance technicians fully loaded? Are you trying to load your schedule to 100%? Do your maintenance technicians go to the warehouse and get their own parts, or are they provided for them? Because you want to provide them for efficiency. Okay. Last but not least, do you have a means to solve repetitive and costly failures? Okay. You communicate to the organization the impact of cash flow that I showed you, the chart that had the 13 failures we eliminated that were hitting us at $240,000 a year. Okay. Your target score on the first one should be 2. Your target score on the second one should be 7, and your target score on the last one should be 2. If you're hitting these, you're doing well with your asset management. But this is a self-assessment you can use. Okay.
Blake, once again, thank you for your time. And I will close the webinar now for everyone. And thank you all and have a great day.
Thanks a lot.